When you really just kind of look at it, zoomed out, the whole science of genetics is
crapshoot.
Statistics. How to lie with statistics, right?
So many people started becoming aware of that, aware of the narrative that was being said versus what was actually happening. Now, what happened with the Spanish flu? What happened to this epidemic and that epidemic? It started making people realize that a lot of our history has been rewritten to emphasize the need for interventions and the propagation of medications to prevent epidemics.
The suppression of symptoms creates a temporary illusion of fixing a problem. Drugs never actually cure any disease. They just move the location and timing of the disease.
So history is a huge factor to how we tell the story of how health and disease have shaped humanity.
Welcome to the One Within All to the InnerVerse podcast. I'm your host, Chance, and I've got an epic one for you today. Since time immemorial, the ruling priest class has extorted a credulous public through a variety of criminal protection rackets, like, give us money and do what we say, or you'll go to hell. And trust us, the reason you're sick is because invisible spirits and demons are attacking you, obviously. But we know the right magic words to ward them off. Don't ask how it works, just pay me. Now, the priesthood has basically shed the spiritual appearances and taken on sciencey jargon, put off the robes and put on the white lab coats, yet the jive is the same. Do as they say, or the lockdowns will continue. Take their chemical products, or the invisible germs will get you. And of course, I hear it all the time. Many doctors mean well, despite failing to get people actually well. But as they say, don't hate the player, hate the game. And that game, of course, is the unholy hieros gamos of allopathic pharmacopoeia and germ theory, the marriage made in hell, and of all the brilliant people I've met since the Cooties World Order, none have educated me quite as thoroughly as today's returning guest, Dr. Marizelle Arce. Last June, we met to talk about her groundbreaking terrain medicine book, Germs Are Not Our Enemy, and the informational density of that discussion was downright staggering, including the supervillain origin story of germ theory, the problems with Louis Pasteur's principles, pleomorphism and microbial precursors, virology, electron microscopy, and a terrain model rundown of diseases commonly said to have been cured by cowpokes, like rabies, measles, and etc. So if you're into this topic, do yourself a favor and make sure you check that one out or revisit it back in the archives. Today with Dr. Arce, we're going to revisit the book to do justice to what didn't make it in the last show and catch up with some of her latest and greatest Substack articles. Check the show notes for links to Dr. Arce's book and for all the ways you can support InnerVerse. Thank you for listening. And please join me in a warm welcome to the extra strength disinfector of the mind and its theoretical contagions and terrain trainer extraordinaire, Dr. Marizelle Arce. Welcome back to InnerVerse and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. That was one amazing intro. Thank you.
Got to get them fired up, right?
Absolutely.
Speaking of fired up, I'm fired up for Elementals Gathering. We're going to get to high five and hug it out in real life.
I know. I'm so excited. I'm really excited. Lots of great people there. Lots of great people.
Yeah, man. So tell me, how have you been since last June? What's been, cooking since the book is out, made the rounds, done pretty well, it looks like.
Yeah, no, it's doing really well. And it, every little day I have some person reaching out, some reader reaching out, telling me, how it really kind of help clear up some of the ambiguity of, what they understood in terms of the terrain model or the history behind it and things like that. And beyond that, it's just I have been adding more educational material to my Substack for people to learn. I think it's important that, because the book is a really good starter book and a really good book to kind of reference when you're trying to think about how to incorporate things, changes in your life when it comes to, the terrain model and, pleomorphism and understanding, our symbionts, microzymas, protists. but there's so much more, right? And I can't put everything that I know in a book because that would just be, volumes and volumes. So my Substack has become the resource with which I kind of vomit my thoughts onto the computer for people to read. And I think it's important to understand that there is a really good, dynamic with everything around you, with everything that we live with and touch and taste and hear about, So I want to constantly add my 2 cents, which, I hope helps to clear sometimes, again, the confusion that's given by a lot of the misinformation out there.
Yeah, your Substack also has some, just those moments where you can't help but share something hilarious or a bit sarcastic because
Oh, yeah.
what we're up against is obviously like clown world, right? For example, like we could start just by talking about some of the earlier thinkers in what you would call now terrain medicine. Back then, it was just called common sense, health, right? Some of those really brilliant minds that we didn't talk about last time and had some great ideas, and how their lineage, like Claude Bernard, Nightingale, Virchow, these guys, and Lady, they, they were basically, to quote your book, proponents of the fact that health is the result of a stable internal environment, right? And when balance is lost, disease follows. And the
Yes.
debate framing that is given by the mainstream and people that want to believe in cooties is that terrain is like this fringe thing, right?
Right.
And that's part of discrediting people like yourself. But if you go back, not even that far, decades more than centuries, terrain was not a fringe idea. It was simply the road not taken by the establishment. And so now, when we're so far down the road of the wrong way, terrain looks fringe because that divergence point was quite a ways back in the dark, scary woods of invisible monsters going to jump out and get you. Whereas the terrain path is like a nice, sunny, flower-filled meadow in this
It's true.
analogy.
It's
But yeah,
true.
I wanted to just talk about, some of those great minds, the interior milieu, the environmental model, Virchow's like social medicine perspective.
Yes.
All of that is still very relevant.
Absolutely. I always preface a lot of what I do to people who, ask, what's a naturopath? What do you do? Well, I essentially am doing environmental medicine. It really boils down to that. And that's where what Virchow and Nightingale and essentially everybody who really understood what healthcare was is managing and understanding the environment around you. And that's essentially health. That's it. Where does your food come from? How clean is the air? Where do you live? What are your thoughts? What are you impacted by? What are the living conditions? What is the job that you do? How are you impacted by your job, your family? All that is outside of your body. And yet it has a huge, huge impact on how your body will, metabolize, process, excrete, eliminate, regulate. So, environmental medicine, understanding, how we are part of our niche, despite the fact that humans are like the only organism that overruns its niche and destroys its niche. Because we're taught to do that, right? We're taught to do that by corporate ideology, even government ideology, or big business ideology. But we are essentially a part of our niche. We're integrated part of our niche, and we are the microcosm of our niche. And then we are the macrocosm of the niches within ourselves. So we have microbiomes. We have mini communities within us as well. So they're always going to reflect on how integrated we are within our own niche, how integrated and symbiotic we are with our own environment.
That's an interesting thing to just think about, like the fractality of that, right? Niches within niches is what constitutes a complex organism like a human being. Yet the one pill suits all type of model, the mass produced everything type of society Everyone's driving the same kind of vehicle. There's only so many choices. The illusion of choice is really
Choice.
what you get, right? There's all these different food products on the shelf, different versions of bread, but you look at the ingredients, it's all the same thing, right?
Absolutely.
So at that level, and also especially with like how it is to try to go your own way, the kind of content I make, right? I have very niche content in some of the subject matters I'd like to talk about. And
Sure.
this society just is not supportive of the niche.
No.
Niches get stitches.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that because the way you said it at the beginning, I was like, I feel like we're going in that direction because of the fact that we have our society used to be a thought society, right? It used to be a society of, like you said, common sense, right? If you grew up on a farm, if you grew up in the country, if you grew up, you were taught to go, okay, how does this work? How doesn't this work? And parents supported that, families, communities supported that kind of figuring out mentality. Now it's more kind of everything's rote. Everything's kind of protocol. Everything is kind of like do this A equals B, just follow it. Don't need to think about it. And then you have generation after generation not having a thought pattern, and then really reinforcing not to question. Right. So, and I really feel like that was really after World War I, it was just this continuation of just keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, don't question. The government's here to help you. They know the best thing. And then it turned into like a total authoritarian, belief system. Like, the cops are the right ones. The politicians are the right ones. Your teachers are right. Everybody's right. You just bow down to that and don't question anything.
Yeah. And there's so many ways that the different enforced narratives interrelate to each other. One that I'm fond of pointing out is how many ideas, especially in terms of like psychology or philosophy or biology and medicine, were very high level, amazing ideas coming out of like Germany, Prussia.
Mm-hmm.
And about the same time that all of this Rockefeller medicine's kicking off, is within the same lifetime as people having massive Germanophobia, you would call it. Like germ man bad. The germ man. The germ mans
Yeah.
are bad. Right.
Right.
So so to talk and
Where's
then we're
that doll? Yeah. Uh-huh.
and getting off the gold standard, going into the endless inflationary cycle of the Federal Reserve being created,
Right.
widening the gap between the wealthy and the poor. All of that is something that, in order for it to work, you need to make sure and uh, not necessarily eliminate the thinking of a figure like Rudolf Virchow, for example, who's like a Prussian or German type guy. The father of pathology, they called him. He was
Mhm.
one of the first guys to really study, like, well, what causes different types of expression of disease.
Right.
And I'd love to talk a little bit about the social aspect of that he was that you touch on in your book, right? Like that is huge because you need to stamp that idea out that it has anything to do with like class or living conditions related to class, if you want to get people to follow along with the Rockefeller business model of hospital factories, if you will.
Right. Yeah, no, he observed, as Florence Nightingale did as well, that, you know, when there was a degradation, again, going back to the environment idea, right? So if your surroundings are breaking down and you're mirroring, your body's going to mirror that, right? So if you're in a surroundings where the conditions are poor, right? The water coming or through the tap or the water that you have access to is dirty. The air that you're breathing, especially during the beginning of the industrial age, was all, lots of factories, industrial pollution, coal, things like that. It was just filthy. Some people were living in conditions where they were sleeping on top of one another on dirty sheets. And how many times did they bathe? How much clean food did they get? How fresh food did they get? They most likely got food that was very old and already starting to go. And, especially with vegetables and citrus and things like that. And that's also why the idea of, being vegetarian was important during that time because nobody was having access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So he was witnessing how the locations with which you see this degenerative type of living condition was where you would see disease. So then he was like, wait a second, this is not, when you have a certain group of people of higher socioeconomic status utilizing money, especially politicians, utilizing money to construct another new building, when in fact that building was just fine. You could have used that money to ramp up some of the conditions of, the ghettos.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
everyone's familiar with food desert, like food deserts in inner cities.
absolutely.
You can get to McDonald's and get chemicals masquerading as food, but getting fresh produce, especially organic produce, forget it. It's not even an option.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And those conditions have not changed, right? We can go back 100 years, 150 years. People were persuaded, I'm being nice, persuaded to come from the country to live in and smash together like sardines in a can in the city. And then you have all sorts of things happening where you have people drinking, alcohol that was not really alcohol, like not real alcohol. It was, watered down with wood alcohol, and they were getting sick from that. And then you have cows being held in the alleyways, drinking the beer mash, sickly cows, and then they're trying to drink the milk from the cows that are literally being poisoned. So then they go, oh, raw milk is bad, and you can go on and on about the conditions, the horrible conditions, that people were living in. And yet, you have this propensity to sell a product rather than change the conditions with which people are living. You sell them a product to supposedly help them. And then the vicious cycle continues.
Or you just go back far enough and this vicious cycle, hundreds and hundreds of years of it, maybe there wasn't even any help or much help at all attempted. Like one of the top things that I wanted to talk about last time that we didn't fit in, because it's usually in probably the top 3 things that someone will try to rebut the idea that germ theory is incorrect or unproven, is the Black Death, right? They're like they're like, "Yeah, but the bubonic plague, man, those rats and their fleas and all the people, and they died, and it was the Black Death, and we know about that. We know that really happened." So, can we just, like, hold that thought for everybody and, let go of the, I would say, propaganda from the history books you've been told about that? Because even though that might seem like, oh, this is just historical information, how is that propaganda? When you understand that it's the same entities that are providing you with all of these different aspects of your worldview, whether it's history or medical, then then it's clear, like, oh yeah, they would want to sell, they really want to sell this Black Death idea.
Well, what's interesting is that when 2020 rolled around, and initially people were very, nervous and things like that. Um, I had contact with people in the supposed hospitals here in New York that were being overrun. So I had friends that were, or my husband had friends that were working in, the hospitals that they said on the news were like, oh my God, there's so many people there. And we'd call them up and say, oh my God, how bad is it? And they'd be like, the usual amount of people. There's no craziness. I don't know why they're saying that in the news.
We actually
So
have time to make orchestrated or like choreographed TikTok dancing videos. So
absolutely,
we're good.
absolutely. So I so many people started becoming aware of that, aware of the narrative that was being said versus what was actually happening. And so that's when I think a lot of people started to the people who are aware of that started digging into going, wait a second, now what happened with the Spanish flu? What happened to this epidemic and that epidemic and, all these different things. And it started making people realize that a lot of our history has been rewritten to emphasize, the need for interventions such as, vaccinations and the propagation of other medications to prevent epidemics. So when you look in history books, when you start digging into history books, and those that haven't been actually touched, so you have to kind of know where to go and what language to look into, and you start to see that even as you can go back to like late 1700s, books from the late 1700s, they don't talk about the Black Plague in the way we were taught about it. And I think I emphasized in my book that some of the symptoms that were described, and prescribed to being the Black Plague were actually two different manifestations of things. So the conglomeration of it made it look like, oh, it's this whole thing, right? So some people were getting like flu-like symptoms, and other people were getting kind of these breakouts that were turning black. And some people were getting black fingers and black hands and black toes. So, those are different things happening, and all just amalgamated as to, oh, look, this is happening worldwide. This is happening, all of Europe. And these are all separate events. And then when you start kind of digging of all the different things that were happening in Europe and in Asia prior to the supposed plague, there were conditions, again, environmental conditions that supported the, people getting sick, right? It was a manifestation of, again, degradation of the environment, not getting the good nutrition, not being in a place where, they could feel dry and warm and safe. And so it's a whole lot of mess of information that just was nicely packaged into, it was an epidemic.
Well, another thing we saw, I just love that because, of course, living conditions in the big cramped cities that were growing in the time of these bubonic plagues were not, they were not clean. No one needs to stretch their imagination
Right.
to realize it's very unclean. There's waste in the streets. There's very little nutrition range. It's all just a lot of starvation and famine. I mean, all the recipes you need to be extremely ill and weak, right? But we witnessed during our tenure here during the Cooties World Order, the changing of definitions of certain words on the fly during the pandemic. And that was amazing to watch because it's something that I was hip to, that this has happened throughout history. So let me give you one. Right. We know that virus meant toxin or poison in the original etymological meaning of it in Greek. Okay, so do you know what plague comes from in Latin?
Tell me, because I
Plaga.
remember.
Yeah, plaga is to strike or wound. Like it's your hurt. It's an injury, and it wasn't changed to, or wasn't ever used in the meaning of like a pestilence or some, plague in the meaning that we think of it until the Vulgate Latin Bible.
Interesting.
So, yeah, in which case it was basically like inferred to be like a divine wrath, a divine punishment of sorts.
Right. The plagues, yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. The 10 plagues of Egypt. So here is a perfect little microcosmic example of what I say all the time, what I alluded to in the intro, which is this idea of invisible germs attacking you is not, it's not just coincidental that it is so similar to the idea of a spiritual affliction that the priests of the old world would try to sell people on as a way to be like, you need me. You need my ointments and unctures and blessings and all of that. It's this. It's literally, it's like it's the same thing. They use this caduceus symbol as the medical symbol. Like it's in exactly the same lineage. The people who are part of that cult, I'm sure, have very little idea of that, but the people who set up that cult are the same people that were running the cult 1,000 years ago.
Right. No, it's just a sidestep. It's a modernization of the same concept. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then once you have it in the Bible, that plaga or plague means this idea of like germs are or whatever. And that's
Mhm.
even more modern, right? Because like in the
Yes.
Bible version, it's there was no idea of germs in that either, right?
No.
But it was like an invisible affliction
Right.
striking people down, causing illness. Now, you have the changing of the meaning of the
Well,
word
let me
over
add to
time,
that.
and when
Yeah.
people see that in the past, they see it in
Yeah.
something old, and they're like, "Plague, oh, I know what that means. It
Right.
means germs." But that was not even the idea back then. So there's like a retroactive historical edit just that happens in people's perception just
Yes.
by the changing of the meaning of a word colloquially.
Right.
Colloquially, that's a hard
Colloquially,
one.
yes.
I hate that
Let
word.
let me yeah, I know. Let me add to that, though. So even if we were to give them some benefit of the doubt in terms of, a plague that's afflicting them, the mentality was still the same, that they did, even if it was a spirit or whatever, it was still, they did something wrong. It didn't just happen. Fast forward to late 18th century with the germ, it was, no, it's not your fault. It just happens that you catch it. It just happens that you have misfortune. You're a good person, you're doing all the right things. It's just by accident. So here's the fix for this. Here's this product. So it's still the product sales, but at least back then it was, let me see if I can fix this, or let me, come back into, it's my fault, I did something wrong, either behaviorally or, something, I killed I killed the neighbor's lamb, so now I have this affliction. But you know that it was you. Whereas now there's no responsibility whatsoever. It's, you just caught it. You could be the healthiest person. I've heard this line 1,000 times. The healthiest person, you're eating the best things, you're exercising, and I just happened to get this.
That's a really good point, and maybe the only exception being you should wash your hands more and buy our disinfectants and, wear a mask, everybody. My mask only works if you wear your mask. But yeah, it reminds me of a line from the book where you say, if disease can just happen instantaneously out of nowhere, then like AKA pathogenicity and all
Right,
that, then
right.
shouldn't health just be able to spontaneously manifest out
The
of
same
ex
way.
nihilo?
Right, right.
It
Exactly the
doesn't go
same
both
way.
ways.
Right, right, exactly. That's exactly the point. I want people to think. I want everybody to start going, if I'm given this, if I can catch something in this way, why can't I just catch health in that way as well? It should be equal footing. Nature is always give or take. We can go into chemistry, we can go into physics. They give us this idea, you know, that it's always, this type of, this amount of exertion this way, you're always going to have this amount of exertion that way, right? In our universe of chemistry, math, and models, you're supposed to believe that every equal opposite reaction. So if that's the case, and you're selling me the idea that I am a really good, healthy person and I catch something, so the opposite should be absolutely true.
Yeah, I think that's part of the big appeal of modern medicine is the fact that the suppression of symptoms creates
Yes.
a temporary illusion of fixing a problem, right? I don't remember who it was that wrote this. I probably read it as a note you posted on your Substack, but this one stuck with me. So I'm just going to credit you to sharing this, but I don't remember the source. But it was like drugs never actually cure any disease. They just move the location
Yes.
and timing of the disease.
Yes.
And when it comes to, a more terrain or holistic, or I should just say real version of health or healing or fixing disease,
Yeah.
the conditions that created the manifestation of these symptoms were not overnight typically.
No.
Maybe something was overnight in the sense that like a stressor was a straw that broke the camel's back and now you're jumping up the scale of detox intensity. But over the course of years, you were building up some kind of imbalance in, something going on in your body. So to expect that you should be able to just flip a switch and be fixed the next day without the necessity of going through like, occasionally a bit of an arduous process in the reversal of those symptoms is just immature.
Absolutely.
Like, it's immature. You should expect that, like, okay, it took me years to get myself into this condition. So at the very least, it might take me months or
Well, again,
something to get out of it.
that's your thinking logically. But if you were to talk to a rheumatologist, they would say, oh, you have rheumatoid arthritis, not because it built up over the course of years, but because you either have it genetically, which is instant, it just turned on, sorry, or, you have some sort of autoimmune response that just happened to again turn on. So again, not your fault. It turned on, we can turn it off. And that's all the rescue devices that they use is always this immune thing or genetic thing to ensure that their rapid response of removal of pain and anguish is justified because it just turns on and we could just turn it off.
Well, that's actually, you brought up genetics. That's something that I don't have like in my notes derived from your book to talk about. But I'm going to guess that you've taken a scrutinizing look into the science of genetics. To me, it feels off. It feels off. I haven't
Always
really
go
done
with your
any,
gut.
I haven't done any deep dives on it, right? But I'm just like, there's something wrong here. Like, okay, the only part of it that feels as if there's some truth to it is like epigenetics, and I see it in clients I do biofield tunings for that, of course, there are traits that are passed from parents to children, right? But is that because of some uh, like unchangeable, immutable secret code that's invisible in your cells? Or is that because of environment and nurture issues?
Right.
Or energy. I mean, we can come
Right.
down to energy on this too. I mean, that's kind
Absolutely.
of all encompassing.
At the end of the day, we don't know, but what we do know, it's not something that you're not passed. You're not passed on from your parents. This kind of like information packets that only medicine can read because they understand the language of ACGTA, right? So that again helps them with them selling the product of we can kind of change that genetic coding for you. We've got the algorithm. We figured it out with our computers. So God made you, but we understand the language with our computers.
And most of it's gibberish. Turns out most of your
Right? No,
secret
yeah,
code is
garbage.
junk.
It's garbage. Yeah, no, yeah,
Don't
it's
worry
garbage.
about it.
He just threw it in there. She just threw it in there, and it's absolute garbage. So the genetics, I actually wrote an article on this on Substack because it's a huge, to me, and I'm going to say this as broadly and as definitive, it's a fraud. It's an absolute fraud because of the fact that the only way to see your genes is through their mechanism. So if we were to go down the road and drive the car of scrutinizing how science finds a virus, it's the same methodologies to find genetics. So then you have to go, well, then if viruses aren't really definitive, they're not really real, unless they've never been proven as such, then genetics isn't either. Because it's all the same things they do.
Can I
Now,
pause you and just try to recapitulate that?
yeah,
Because
sure.
I definitely get where you're going with that. But for the audience, we've probably, most of us have heard at this point, no one has ever isolated and purified a particle called a virus and demonstrated that it causes the symptoms that virus was seen in conjunction with in an ill person's body, right? So
Right,
no one has ever found a virus, brought it out separately in a scientific fashion, and then
right,
put it in somebody else, and then those symptoms were then manifest. That is
right,
not real. That's never happened, which is the first thing in Koch's postulates that would have
right,
been necessary to prove germ theory and pathogenicity.
right.
So in the same way, if I catch your drift, you're saying no one has ever like isolated DNA in a way that proves that this thing causes cells to grow this way.
Correct. So you can say, I see DNA in an electron micrograph, right? I could see the DNA. They show you your little chromosomes and all that. Great. But tell me how that makes my hair brown. Show me how that works. Where does that, you can have all the math and the models on a nice squeegee board as much as you want, but you're not showing me in my body or in a biological entity how that exactly works. You can make up ideas that it does, and you can show correlations, you can show patterned effects, but that's just your assumption and observation of patterns. And you've created a language to identify those patterns so that you can come to some sort of repeatable response that sits within your bell curve, because obviously everybody know what a bell curve is. There's always going to be outliers that don't fit the bell curve. And that's with everything with science, unfortunately. Things can be repeatable, but they're only repeatable within the bell curve. There's always going to be this doesn't repeat and this doesn't repeat in that way. So people get really stuck on, but how do they find that this and it makes this and they know that it's going to make this? They don't know that it's going to make this, but they're making a judgment call, almost like a 50-50 that it's gonna. And then if you were to dive down into the whole placebo or nocebo effect, anything can be made to happen if you really, really, truly believe it. So we've got a whole lot of variables happening to make things look the way they do. But when it comes to us inheriting, what traits that our parents have, we can see that sometimes we inherit things because, look, my dad had brown hair, so I'm going to have brown. The likelihood of me being born with brown hair is going to be high, right? We just know that. We just don't know the gene that does that or what specifically causes me to want to inherit that. Because why does my sister have blonde hair? Right? And again, we could say the gene. We can go back to Mendel. Mendel was doing with the peas and things like that. Great. You can kind of combine and make the patterns of, if I combine a red one with a green one, sometimes it comes out with the red, sometimes the green, and sometimes it's striped. So you keep doing that 1,000 times, you start to see, again, a bell curve. But we're much more complex. And so, what I tell people is what you inherit is the best things from your parents that they can give you, right? So if your parents are not really that healthy, they've eaten McDonald's their whole life, the likelihood of you being born with everything that you need is going to be lower. Doesn't mean you don't have everything. It's just going to be lower, which means that you just have to work a little harder. And eventually, if you don't conform to their behaviors of how they were in their niche, in their home, and you change your lifestyle, half their ails that they may be going through in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, you won't have because you didn't live their life, even though you were born from them.
Right. But the science of genetics would want you to think, oh, your dad had a heart attack. Your dad's going to, you're having all the things they're having. But you keep bringing up, you say things like 50-50, bell curve. When you really just kind of look at it zoomed out, the whole science of genetics is a
crapshoot.
Is statistics.
Yes.
It's a big smoke and mirrors game of statistics.
Yep.
And of course, as Bill Gates had the book titled, during the lockdowns on his bookshelf behind him, like How to Lie with Statistics, right? Huh? They know about this. And the beauty, I think, of genetics as a part of the bigger con,
the control mechanism
of worldview warfare. Because to me, like I say this all the time, the only warfare is worldview warfare.
Yes.
Your worldview and germ theory is a huge attack on your worldview. It has everything to do with your self-view. They mirror each other, right?
Absolutely.
And, a bigger part of the worldview warfare of the science of genetics is how that then gets used to reinforce the history narrative that we're told. Because guess what? History is just as sketchy and shaky from the mainstream academic perspective as any of these modern scientific paradigms. I mean, possibly worse in some ways. I mean, you think the science is bad, wait till you look at the history. It's rough.
It's true. No, but it's true. History, this is why I'm such an antiquarian, because to me, when I look at the first Encyclopedia Britannica, 1771 was the first Encyclopedia Britannica. And I look in there and I go, some of that stuff in there is not exactly how we're taught currently. And then you start going, well, if that's the case, then what other stuff? And how we see disease, and this is what I emphasized in my book, the idea that all the way to, if you really want to believe that Greek antiquity existed, right? So that's another conversation. So if it did, the claim is that they saw smallpox and chickenpox and all sorts of other plagues and diseases, and that these things carried all the way there to here, to present day. Now, again, that's the superimposition of our view, of medicine science view, on what they're claiming as a reaction. So whatever reaction they were talking about, bumps on the skin. Oh, they had measles. They just didn't call it measles. That was measles. So now science gets to claim diseases have this type of antiquity. So it then guess who gets no fault? No fault is the chemical industry, the vaccine industry, whatever industries that pervade our society with chemicals. So when measles showed up, because it was a reaction to some sort of environmental toxin, be it via vaccination or environment, you don't go, oh, this is a new toxin. We had measles 2,000 years ago. We're just having an epidemic surge. So history is a huge, huge factor to how we tell the story of how health and disease have shaped humanity. Because if you have people lying about what diseases were and how long ago diseases, have been going on, then you can have many people get off the hook for destroying the health of people now.
Yeah, it's just too bad how strongly the polio was fixed by cowpokes, and that type of propaganda has really locked in on my parents' generation. It's impossible really to have this conversation because it's always like, well, I knew a guy and he's paralyzed because he got polio, and so polio bad and cowpokes fixed it. And no other aspects of the environment or conditions or anything are brought into consideration. It's just like the white coats told me that wasn't a polio thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Everything is conflated. Everything's conflated. Everything's confused. Everything's botched up because unless you were there, like we've lived 2020.
How many people were just in the hospital and died for some reason and it got marked down as a cooties death, right? So how many people got paralyzed for some reason and it was marked down as polio back then? Because it supported this agenda to push out polio pokes.
Right. And then how many people were marked on their death certificate died of COVID when they were in car accidents because they tested positive, in the morgue, right? So go 50 years into the future and they're going to look at 2020 as another epidemic the same way they did with the Spanish flu, when people who were living during the Spanish flu were like, this wasn't that big of a deal. What are they talking about?
Man, I feel like that should just settle it, because anyone on any side is aware that type of fudging the numbers was happening in our lifetime. So how hard is it to conceive of that was the case at other points in recent history? Because it's the same establishment. Why wouldn't they if it supports their agenda?
Absolutely. As my husband always says when I say something about some topic or family member, I wasn't there, so I don't know. So many of us should start kind of really taking in the I don't know. Stop believing, because you now know that textbooks, newspapers, a lot of even people who are investigative journalists are not really investigating and are subsidized by the same people creating the narrative. So unless you were there, you don't know. You have no idea.
And even in the case of things that you were there for, you don't necessarily have an idea. Like you were a little kid and some other kid you knew got paralyzed and you were told it was polio. Do you really know that it was polio? Because the
Oh,
reason you think you know that is because someone told you that back then,
we can
right?
go we can go not only polio, you can go to a lot of historical events. A lot of historical events that, supposedly a lot of people died.
We went to the moon. I saw it on TV when I was a kid.
Right? And so then you have people going, I was 5 and, everybody was crying and, I remember, this, that, and the other. And then, but you weren't told at 5 what was happening. You were told when you were 20 what had happened and you added that to your memory bank. And that's like the people that go and again, like the Twin Towers, what they saw. Did you see what you saw?
Man, and they really shut down everything for that one. Like everyone in my school, I was in 5th grade and we were all no, 6th grade, and we all just had to stop class and just watch the TV all morning.
Oh my gosh.
It's so creepy. Yeah.
I was an EMT during that time, so believe me, I know.
I love how you're saying you're an antiquarian because I myself, like my favorite books are the ones that come from the late 1700s or
Oh, yeah.
before 1850 or so.
Yep.
And it seems like things just really took a turn after, you know, the Civil War in this
Yes.
country. And
Yes.
that's where the really rapid downhill slide started happening. But what are, apart from like old encyclopedias and dictionaries, Webster's 1828 dictionary, by the way, is killer.
Oh, nice.
Hit
I don't
that
have
up.
that one. I'm gonna have to look
Yeah,
it up.
there's a website version of it. It's
Oh, good.
you have a lot better search results there than the modern Merriam-Webster. But what are some books that you would recommend to people from the olden days that still hold up?
Yeah, olden, that's a good one.
Golden oldies.
Oh, yeah. Well, all the old naturopath books, if you can get your hands on old naturopath books, I mean, they're not before 1850, they're more late 1800s. If you can get your hands on like late 1800s, early 1900s, really before they started doing the naturopathic split, World War I kind of split. There's a lot of good stuff in there. There's Adolf Just and Louis Kuhne and Benedict Lust, a lot of German, Sebastian Niep, all the old naturopaths, just the ones that just were not into, the propaganda of the Spanish flu or any of that stuff, A really good antiquarian book. I mean, if you're looking for an antiquarian book, it's going to be few and far between. So good luck. Yeah, you could probably go to different websites and find the old naturopathic books and stuff like that. Old magazines.
Yeah, you'd probably just be better off looking up certain thinkers and some of their
Yeah.
writings. I mean, that Virchow guy that we were talking about, he wrote like 2,000 publications in his life.
Yeah. I have his first. Has his first book he ever wrote. So that wasn't cheap.
Wow.
Cheap at all. But it's interesting to see that if you do have, and I have books varying, from some of the late 1700s all the way obviously to the 1950s. And one of the books that I have a lot of frequency was the U.S. Pharmaceutical Directory. And the pharmaceutical, what it was basically all the things known to be used by doctors. And I have it from, I think, the late 1800s. I have a couple of them, and they went from being this thick to like this thick. And you actually see in it lard and tallow and castor oil and all sorts of things like back in the day, over 120 years ago. And then you start to see it disappear. And in comes like ammonia-based, arsenic-based, mercury-based, crap, as it fills in the books for what doctors were utilizing as medicines.
So to take a slightly different turn here, one thing that's been on my mind, obviously, as a newer parent, is teaching our children about healthy terrain and hygiene and things like that without making them get obsessive. Because I know young kids who have parents that are very like germophobic,
Yeah.
and I see how like a 2, 3, 4-year-old kid is like afraid to be dirty,
Oh
afraid
my
of
gosh.
things like that, and like literally there's like a phobia happening there, and that's I don't think that's genetic.
No,
I think that that's learned behavior. And
no.
so, I wanna teach these principles in a good way. I wanna help maybe my child understand what's going on when she gets a runny nose or if she gets a earache and things like that. I also Yeah, we'll stop there, but there's other things in this topic, like talking about kids' health, that I'm would really like to get into.
Well, I have on my Substack Navigating the Terrain, and it's basically like these cute little short snippets and then JPEGs that you can print out, like, full page JPEGs that are colorful that you can print out to teach your kids. And I do about one post twice a month. And by the end of this year, I'm going to probably all put it together as like a handout book that people can buy and go through each lesson with their child about how to understand their body and the terrain and not to be afraid of how important the world around them is and how they have to be a part of that. It still boils down to how I was raised, right? My mother was a biologist. And it was always about being out in nature, always about, understanding how we affect the birds and the birds affect us and all the animals around us and the grass and the trees and the flowers and the soil. I was really, when you have a mother who's a biologist, but also not an ecologist, but a microbiologist, where she was taking pond water and showing us, because that's what she did with her classes, on our little microscopes growing up, we got to see all the stuff moving around in the pond water, and she's showing us how this is life. Life is everywhere, and that we will impact it. She was the person in her school to actually start back in the 90s the recycling program in her school, because she understood how we impact nature, and we need to provide for ourselves because it resonates back. The more crap we put out in the environment, it's going to resonate back, and it's going to come into us. And look, what do we find? We find people talking about how they have the forever chemicals in their body because it's in the water, it's in the soil, it's in the food. The plastic, microplastics, the this, that, and the other. And my mom was starting that in the 90s, talking about how detrimental all these chemicals and stuff was in our world. So you don't have to have a science degree, despite my mom having one, but you don't have to have a science degree to know that. Look, how many of us were brought up with don't throw trash out the window when you're driving in the car, don't litter, don't understand that the way you respect the environment is the choices that you make. And that's going to resonate back energetically and physically.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like, I guess just it comes down to, the belief that you are holding in yourself, whether or not that belief is rooted in fear or rooted in trust of life.
Right.
And even if you, as a parent or just a human being around other human beings, even if you're not intentionally using like fearful language or spooky wording to your kids, if inside you have a fear of
Right.
something, and maybe it's subconscious still because it's a lot of beliefs are subconscious in nature.
Right.
You're not
Right.
actively thinking about it. That creates an energy that does permeate in a literal terrain effect
Right.
of the environment around you, especially with your children, because your children on a biofield level are very
Mirrors.
connected.
Yeah.
They're mirrors, yeah, I mean, you could say, like, up until 6 or 7, they're actually, like, hooked in and eating energy off of your biofield as a parent, because that's
Mm-hmm.
how they're developing and structuring themselves at that
Mm-hmm.
time. Like, just the other just the other day, I was doing a tuning for somebody, and this comes up all the time, that in the, like, root area of the body, the hips, the glutes, intestines, and all that, we very, very regularly, I can just pick right out how old they were when they moved house as a kid.
Mhm.
Alright, so I found this example, in the person I was working on. I was like, 1 or 2, you moved house, and
Mhm.
you I'm sure don't have a lot of memory of this, but there's a
Mhm.
ton of anxiety and insecurity about this moving event, from when you were that little, and it's leaving an impression here, and it's like, the bigger as as, we went through this tuning, the bigger picture pattern that we were uncovering had to do with, like, uh, commitment regret. That,
Mhm.
like, big changes that require commitment are going to cause me, some kind of regret later. And how
Mhm.
this was manifesting in the body for this individual was, like, acid reflux and
Mhm.
indigestion. It's
Mhm.
like, I committed to eating this food, I regret it later. And what's cool is, we haven't talked about pleomorphism yet, but when I get into these, like, stomach level and intestine level of the body energy balancing with clients, and I tell them after the session, I'm like, "Hey, get back to me about, like, how how's your poop after this?" Because, more often than not, they will report, like, either a temporary, like some kind of flushing going on in that
Mhm.
regard, or just the more often the coherence of the poop gets better. Like
Mhm.
it's solid, more solid, but not hard, more clean and more easy going. And this person, we worked on this old childhood stress around the insecurity in the home that the parents were feeling, the stress over this moving, and the
Right.
ripple effects that had in other events of his life where it was a repeating pattern. And it wasn't long later that I got the report that his and in my opinion, this is pleomorphism in action because the internal energetic environment has shifted and it's reflected. It has to be a biome thing if it's changing the way excrement manifests without any
Absolutely.
other change happening in the person's life, diet,
Absolutely.
whatever.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. It's we pleomorphism happens on so many different degrees, and we again, it's something that we can't. There's no metrics for it right now, so science doesn't want to feel like it exists. It's just like again, energy. Like you start talking about auras and biofields, and they start going foo foo and more metaphysics than anything else. But it's real because we know we've seen interactions, we've seen pattern changes, you've witnessed pattern changes, and there's so many practitioners that do as well. So, yes, when we adapt, when we allow for the flow and there's adaptation, your microbiome will see to it that it helps regulate that even better to become more efficient.
If there was something in terms of, like, more instantaneous healing despite there being a long-term damage situation, long-term, problem, microzyma and pleomorphism is something that can happen, like, overnight, which is really fascinating, super
Absolutely.
fascinating.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Uh,
they're like a little they're like a they I would compare your biome as, like, a civilization that you're the god of.
It's true. It's true. I mean, like when sometimes I wonder sometimes like the whole idea when you hear someone say or you hear religious or some sort of spiritual like God's within you and I'm like, yeah, because I have all these cities and communities and a whole infrastructure that I am the god of, right? So the way I tell my minions, how to be is going to be how it's going to be, right? So my belief, my godlike power will change how they react.
Yeah, the whole civilization can shift overnight by the word of
Right.
what you think, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're wrapping up hour 1 here. Can we, let people know anything that you want them to follow you on or pick up? Like, of course, if you haven't read the book, Germs Are Not Our Enemy, that book is one of my favorites that I've read last year and, still reference it all the time, try to get people to read it all the time. But also Marizelle's Substack is great. Anything else you wanna plug?
Um, Well, obviously the elements gathering that we're going to have, people need to go. You need to go. It's going to be a one of a kind type of thing. And hopefully it's going to keep repeating itself. So, we keep going. But that's going to be at the beginning of May 8th. I'll also be at Confluence a little earlier a couple weeks earlier to that. So at the end of April Confluence I'll be there. So I'll see anybody who's watching. I'll be there to answer any questions and things like that. But Substack is probably your best bet in terms of following new information or old information that I just reiterate and write an article about. And beyond that, I am putting together, it's a little bit of a secret, but I'm trying to put together a conglomeration of courses with not only myself, but other good practitioners, really well-rooted practitioners, to start getting people to have a base of knowledge, and so that they can have agency to be able to handle, like, when I have children, what do I teach them? How do I teach them? Things like that. Or myself, how can I be better for myself and know better for myself and have the strength to know so that my children can know as well. So it's all about really digging in deep and having a really good fundamental basis of the terrain model in all aspects of life.
Which it turns out is not super complicated. It's just like eat clean, get sunshine, get fresh water, clean water, and try to avoid toxins and help your body when it's detoxing. It's actually simple.
That's it. Now you're certified. Good for you.
All right, not certified naturopath. I'm gonna put it in my bio on social media. All right. Well, thank you, Marizelle, and I look forward to joining you again for the members on the second part. Hey guys, thank you for being here again. Another phenomenal episode. I was so looking forward to talking to Dr. Marizelle again. Last episode about a year ago was one of the top favorites I had for all of 2025. And this time getting to flow through the subject matter a little more loosely. It's one of those big old agree parties, and I don't mind that at all. I find her very agreeable. So if you are curious about what we talked about in part 2 for the low price of $8 a month on Substack, Patreon, or the YouTube channel membership, first we discussed the pros and cons of German New Medicine.
Not everybody is going to perceive some sort of antagonistic relationship in the same way. So they shouldn't be having the same physiological response.
And I think there's a lot to like about GNM, and Marizelle agreed with me, but we also have some hesitation. Then we talked about terrain theory and toddlers. People are always saying, I hear it all the time, oh yeah, my kids pick up stuff from school all the time. Schools are germ factories. We talk about why that is not true.
I get very ill to my stomach when mothers are not understanding why their 1-year-old can't adapt to this environment of being alone.
And that leads us into a really nice, fuller conversation about holistic parenting. She's got a couple of kids.
The baby, their identity is their mother's. That person now disappears for 7 hours. They don't know how to adapt.
She's doing the working mom thing, but she's managing it in a way that does not separate her from her children, which I think is frankly really difficult and not necessarily something that should even be aspired for. I personally am of the mind that if you can have a setup where the dad is the provider and the mom can be full-time, that's great. And maybe mom later down the road starts to get into doing her thing in a vocational sense once again. But that being said, great flow on the holistic parenting part, something very important to me with where I'm at. And then after that, we got into discussing earwax. I know you've been waiting to hear what is earwax all about. Why is there this waxy gold coming out of my head holes?
When we start to have symptoms of congestion and things like that, I always look to earwax to see if it's dried out.
How does earwax apply in terrain theory? Like, how can we diagnose with it? Great stuff there. And then maybe my favorite part of the entire Plus extension was that we discussed the EMF, electromagnetic frequency boogeyman. EMF sensitivity. What is it really? Are we actually under attack by these frequencies at all time? Is this something we should really be worried about? Or is there a different framework that we can comprehend it under?
And what's funny is in my office, I have a mesh router hidden. My patients who are EMF sensitive never complained about my office, even though my office was an EMF hub.
All around fantastic episode. Really great. Just as good as last time. I'd like you guys to, aside from signing up to Patreon or Substack, consider going over to my Instagram or TikTok. I know those are not the greatest places to be, but let's be honest, a lot of you are there anyway. So find InnerVerse Podcast on one of those platforms. I've been putting a lot more work into my short form content, aka Reels, Shorts, etc., TikToks, condensing clips, making some sensational little 1-minute bangers, and I think they're really awesome. Algorithm doesn't necessarily love the niche that we're in, and that's okay. But if you would like to check out what I'm doing there, maybe even repost, put to your stories, or just comment, help me drive some engagement, really helps the show, and it doesn't cost you anything. You're just engaging with content that you're already watching if you're listening to me talk right now. Also, we have the Elementals Gathering coming up in just a little over a month, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. I'm so excited about this. Check the link in the show notes, elementalsgathering.com, if you'd like to come join us and all the fantastic speakers, including Dr. Arce in South Central Missouri, my homeland, my native stomping grounds. You can use the code InnerVerse to get $30 off of your ticket. I do Biofield tunings, if you didn't know that from this conversation and all the other times I've brought it up. And I've actually found myself booked up all the way till on the other side of Elementals. So if this is something you're considering doing, or maybe you want to get another tune-up, you've already done one, you've been thinking about it, I recommend getting in there and scheduling as soon as possible, because at this point, the soonest you're going to get in with me is middle of May or after. So check that out in the links in the show notes as well. InnerVersePodcast.com/sound-healing. There's also lots of other ways to support. There's Tippecanoe Herbs. Use the coupon code InnerVerse there, and you're going to get 10% off your order. We've got Lotus Way, great products from Lotus Way, flower essence elixirs. Love that stuff too. Use it every day. I'm on that juice right now as we speak. And Brandon Sterling's business building school class. That's probably not exactly what it's called. But if you want to learn to trade like a wizard, if you want to free yourself from financial servitude, if you want to learn how to turn money into money the way the tiny hats do, hey, who better to learn from than a guy who gets all of the strawman stuff, patriot, mythology, etc., is on our team, wants to provide the inside info to those of us who are profane, bring you into the financial temple, if you will. All in all, I'm grateful you're here. Super awesome to connect through this show. Really enjoying the flow of podcasts lately. Got lots of good stuff planned in the works. Got another Inner World episode coming up soon. We're going to go deeper into Baal. That's been my obsession for the last couple days. Got really good notes. Can't wait to deploy. Might be a little while because I have a few things on the calendar ahead of it, but hey, life's good. I hope you guys are feeling good. I hope you guys are not afraid of germs or other boogeymen. And take care of yourself. Have a good spring. Happy Aries season. I will catch you guys on the flip. Much love.
Toxins make us ill. Quit the poison pill. Clean food and water will make you feel better. Nature's not a war zone. Don't fear the microbe, no. Tiny bugs to fight. We are made of light. Terrain is the map. Our biome fills the pitches of vibration help detoxification with nutrition and hydration, and life is a vacation. The only thing to sterilize are the worries and the lies. Your inner verse is wise, and the truth will always rise.